Hey, and welcome to the show. We are on the Cheap Mama Life podcast. Once again, I have guest Renee Card, who is a local mom here in the school district that my children were attending. And she is actually running for office for the school board. She saw a problem and an opportunity to enact change because Litchfield School District has adopted a transformational equity work document that on the surface, looking for equity, looking for resources for all kids to succeed, sounded like a great idea. And the more she and other moms dug in, the more politically charged these motives seem to be. So Renee, tell me about the research that you've recently done and what has come up and what is it that you want people to be aware of and to see?
So we've done quite a bit of research into this topic within our district and also just in general on the topic of the 1619 Project and critical race theory and the indoctrination of kids in school. But on a local level, we have begun trying to gather information as to who the people were that are on these committees, the District Diversity Empowerment Committee, and started doing some research into their position as they were, as we think is very important to finding out what exactly the meat and bones of this transformational equity work that the district is doing and attempting to implement is going to, contains. So
so let me, and the committee, correct me if I'm misunderstanding. So the committee is the position of the district was, or has been, or there have been people that have said that, hey, I don't know what everybody's arguing about. This committee was made up of the community, right?
correct.
And so why is there an argument? Let's address that, right? And
Correct.
you've gone into the makeup of the committee and you found some concerns with how that was made up, that perhaps it didn't wasn't comprised of a good sampling of the entire community, or why is that?
Correct. So what we're finding is that now that we have the list of the people that were on this committee who worked to develop this transformational equity work document and who are pretty much leading the cause for the CRT-like program within LESD, we found that what the district was telling us was essentially lying by omission, because they were telling us that it was comprised of community members, parents, teachers, educators, administrators within the district. What they were not telling us was that it was one viewpoint, one generalized viewpoint, very leftist extreme viewpoint that they sought out, which we were anticipating was the case, but they hadn't come out and told us that. So once we acquired the list of the people on this committee, we started doing some research into these individuals and found that they are very, very far left extremists that had teachers walking out on our children in 2018. A lot of these are very pro Black Lives Matter supporters and anti-police, or they're very pro defunding police. Mm-hmm. And so that raised additional concerns, because that tells us that there were no conservative voices on these committees. They were not listening to both sides or all sides. They were listening to one side.
Right. So I am going to go ahead and I guess we'll start. You had sent me a copy of that list. Shall we start simply by sharing it? And
sure.
We'll do that. There we go. Oops. Well, there we go. So you had texted them to me. So here is, are you able to see that on our screen? I've got my messy little computer screen. You see everything behind it too, probably, huh?
I see it here. I see it.
Okay. Oh, goodness. Okay. So we have the diversity empowerment team. So this says that there's an outside facilitator by the name of Amber Checky from an organization called Anytown. Latrice Gettings, a parent at one of the schools. Tamilia Valenzuela, also a parent. Kamaria McDonald, a parent. Brittany Austin, a teacher, a special education teacher. Eva Aguila, administrative assistant. Griselle Hedges, a behavior coach. Heather Maxwell, another behavior coach from a different school. Anthony Munoz, a teacher. Kimberly Moran, that's one of the governing board members, correct?
Correct. That's one of the board members that we are.
Okay. Jocelyn Vosex. I'm going to butcher that name. I'm sorry, Jocelyn. I don't mean to do that. Jen Benjamin, who is also a principal. Casey McQuarrie, an assistant principal. Meredith Nose, a principal of a preschool. And John Scudder, director, Title I. So on the surface, as I read those names, it looks like they've got a fairly diverse group of people. Is that not the case?
That's not the case. That's not what we're finding to be the case. Aside from some of the district personnel that are on there, the community involvement that was sought, we'll just start there. Amber Checky is a very polarizing figure, a lot like the Calvin Terrells, if you will, who has this organization that hashtags BLM, Black Lives Matter, inclusion counts, Black Lives Count, stop tone policing, things like this. And so that triggered us to go out and do some more research into what she stands for, and also what her reputation in the community is with this organization. We have found some very disturbing things. One of the things that we found was quite a bit of news stories in relation to a foster child back in 2019 that her and I believe her partner were fostering, who they were identifying as a transgender 9-year-old. So those are just some of the things that, obviously tell us that she is very far on one side of the political spectrum versus somewhere in the middle, which tells us, okay, there's one individual that we brought in from outside of the community to facilitate, and she has very strong views on certain things that are very controversial, like Black Lives Matter, like LGBTQ, those kinds of things. So that's just the one. I mean, we can start there if you'd like.
So okay, so this is a LinkedIn, right? Okay, so you had sent me, I think it's her LinkedIn profile, right? I just went to Facebook and it didn't seem to have what you sent. So let me look.
Correct.
All right, I'm going to go ahead, just so that it's easier for folks to share. I'm going to pull it up here so that people can actually see it, not having that small. Let's see. Okay. All right, so I am going to share that screen again so that you can point out what it was that you had. All right, you see that okay?
I do.
All right, so it looks like she's a nonprofit social change maker. Is the profile. What else? You went to the, was it? Nope.
No, so that I clicked on more, and that didn't exactly give me a whole lot. So then I went to her Twitter page, and I will just quote some of the tweets from December 14th,
Okay.
or retweets. One of them
I
is,
I can go there too as you're doing that.
And so on December 14th, she retweeted a tweet from Inclusion Counts, and the tweet says, "Minorities aren't immune to negative messages about their racial groups. Internalized racism is a form of internalized oppression that includes both conscious and unconscious acceptance of racial hierarchy in which whites are consistently ranked above people of color.
I am not going to be able to get in there, but go ahead. I'll
That's
just
okay.
listen to that. It's not.
Sure.
I'll try and do it behind that.
I mean, that's just one of the things, you know, so that pretty much tells you which side of the equity or the CRT argument she stands on. You know, the part that sticks out to me is the internalized racism is a form of internalized oppression that includes both conscious and unconscious acceptance of racial hierarchy in which whites are consistently ranked above people of color. So in her view, there is no, you know, the way I read that, there is no way to say that there isn't white racism within our district. That is what the implication is that, you know, that there is white racism within our country, and that whether it be conscious or unconscious, it is there, and whites see themselves as the oppressor, or she views them as the oppressor, and that's very troublesome. I mean, saying that they are consistently ranked above people of color is very troublesome, because that tells me that she's not going to put in any equitable work to identify needs of white children when she's doing this work.
And she is the paid facilitator, correct? So the district is actually paying her to facilitate, or no?
We don't know that for sure.
Okay.
We think that's the case. She's the only outside facilitator included on this committee. We have not received our records request from LESD that we submitted on April 1st, that were originally due April 29th, and now it is June 4th, and we're still waiting. We have reached out to the district several times to ask for the information that we requested, and we keep, you know, getting put off until next week, or I'll get back to you tomorrow and let you know the status. But we believe it's because they don't want to release this information, because we did request contracts and any correspondence pertaining to equity, inclusion, equality, anything related to this type of work. And so, you know, we did that in the hopes that that would tell whether or not they are paying this group.
Okay. All right. So that is the first. I'm just going to kind of go through this list. I'm going to pull up the next one. This one I'm going to I'll do a quick share screen for the audience now. So this one is Tamilia Valenzuela. So this is the Facebook profile, what she's sharing with folks.
And Tamilia,
so she has, so right here, I see on May 8th, it has the Be Anti-Racist and Stop White Terrorism on her profile.
correct.
Are you sharing the screen? Yeah.
Yes.
So
and Tamalia is one of the 3 parents listed as committee members. So, you know, her and the we're anticipating the other two parents on the committee. One we know, Kamari McDonald is related to Calvin Terrell, who is a very polarizing, very, in my view, racist public speaker, or I think he calls himself a social justice trainer. And these are the parents. These are the only 3 parents that were asked to be on this committee. So when you go to their pages and you see things like being colorblind only works to ease you being complacent in white supremacy while not actually doing anything to combat it.
Right.
Those kinds of statements and white terrorism and be anti-racist, those are all things that speak to the committee work being founded in critical race theory-like principles. They obviously believe that, or they wouldn't be posting these things publicly, which, you know, we're not saying exclude people who support CRT in these committees. We're saying don't only include people who support CRT in these committees. And that's exactly what they've done. They've included 3 parents who are very much Black Lives Matter proponents and very much posting things that tell us they are in favor of critical race theory in our schools.
Yeah, this, I think this decolonization in education says a lot about the mindset that this person would be coming to.
Exactly.
The table.
It's very telling when you go and you look at their social media profiles and you see the things that they are supporting. It's very telling as to what the strategy is with this committee and what their belief systems are and what they're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, certainly a lot of information on that one. What was I'll go ahead and pull the other ones up that you just mentioned.
Sure.
Okay. So far, I see a lot on Black History Month. So certainly somebody who's passionate about the subject. Now, I think you had sent some, I think I had seen, or there were some posts. Are those been taken down that made, that you had shared?
I believe some of them have come down.
Here's a Black Lives Matter one. And of course, that's the biggest argument, correct, for you, is that, you know, BLM has no place in our school, right?
Correct, exactly. You see things like social justice speaking about, you know, supporting the Breonna Taylor and George Floyd victimization and things like that, and talking about, you know, racist injustice and things like that. And you know, we're not saying that there isn't racism in our country. That's not what we're saying.
Right.
What we're saying is that race should not be the focus of equity work within our district. And that's exactly what these folks are pushing, is for the work to be done for specific groups only and to be done so based on race.
Mm-hmm. And I think, and you had said the person that she's, that has come into the district or in other places in Arizona, correct?
Correct. Kelvin Farrell was a presenter at the ASBA, the Arizona School Board Association's equity training, which was attended by Kimberly Moran and Melissa Zeidema, the 2 board members we're trying to recall. And if you go to Kelvin Farrell's page, you can see some very disturbing and polarizing posts that, you know, clearly lead you to understand what he supports and what his thought process is. And so we feel that it's discriminatory in every sense to only train, teach, and consider the opinions of these people on these committees that are working to develop an equity plan that should affect and invoke change for all children. And that's not occurring right now.
I see. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of very one-sided posts, if nothing else to say. Here, you show there's I think there's some Red for Ed. Tell me about Red for Ed and why the involvement in Red for Ed would be, is
Red for Ed was very much a push of the teachers' unions, who are very, very much supported by the Democratic Party.
Okay.
They have a lot of extremely liberal points of view, and they obviously champion the cause to have all of our teachers walk out on our students back in 2018. So that's one of the reasons why Red for Ed has been a controversial group, because now you're seeing that some of these Red for Ed supporters are coming out and doing podcasts and Facebook Live posts in support of the equity work, which is, fundamentally founded in critical race theory. And so to us, that tells us very directly which side of the coin they're on. And that's okay. That's okay that you support those things if that's truly what you believe, and it's an informed, fact-based opinion. However, that also tells us that yet another person who is supportive of Red for Ed was on this committee, but there was nobody from the opposition.
Right. And then here's another parent that you'd mentioned, Heather Maxwell, with also branded as Black Lives Matter. And that is that my understanding is that really is, at the end of the day, the biggest concern with
Heather Maxwell is actually an employee. She's a behavioral coach within the district. So obviously that's concerning to us, because yet again, not only were the parents that were sought to be on this committee very much from one side of the spectrum, but also the employees of the district have openly and publicly gone out and voiced support for things like Black Lives Matter. And that is a little bit, it lends itself to the argument that we're making, that there was only one viewpoint that was taken into consideration for me.
So it's not that you are condemning these people for their involvement in BLM or in Black Lives Matter. The concern is that, hey, everybody on the committee that this is a diversity, equity, and inclusion document according to you, district. And as I go through this cast of characters or people that have input and are making these decisions for all of our children, this cast isn't very diverse. This cast is one that all supports Black Lives Matter, very, not just, hey, I support it, but very vocally supports Black Lives Matter. And I'm guessing not that there's anything inherently wrong per se if somebody believes in that organization. That's something that they support and wish.
Personally, I do think that there are a lot of issues within that organization that are discriminatory. I think there's a lot of positions they have taken that have shown and proved themselves to be divisive. I think that if you show support publicly for an organization like Black Lives Matter, you are telling us essentially that you're actively engaged in that movement.
So I think my question is not that there's if I chose to support that organization, great, go support that organization. However, what this is telling us is we also saw in that transformational equity work document, that all of the resources that were being used to teach and train equity were coming from organizations that were either in partnership or being supported by Black Lives Matter. Is that correct?
Correct. And so what we're saying is that they're expressing only one viewpoint on.
Right. So this whole cast of characters
there's one perspective.
I was going to say, so this whole cast of characters is one that supports that and is now promoting that in the document that they are writing up. And the argument is there's no input from those that oppose it.
Correct.
And there's no, and at the end of the day, is that both of you've talked about Red for Ed, we've talked about Black Lives Matter. Those are very much politically charged organizations. Agree with them, disagree with them, whatever. There's definitely there's a line on in red, in blue, and what those belief systems are. And if we truly want that separation and we want our children to be able to form their own opinions, you can't have one belief without the other. You can't.
Correct. You cannot
both.
You cannot.
And the board is supposed to be partisan.
Exactly. And so you cannot tell me that you are doing equity work and you're taking into account and consideration all perspectives within our community, yet assemble a committee that, for all intents and purposes, is solely on one side of the equation.
So Renee, with that point, you're running for the board. So correct. I'm going to ask you a challenging question. I didn't prepare you for this, so I apologize if it's a tough one. So let's say you're on the board and you are putting together this committee. Would Black Lives Matter, people who believe in Black Lives Matter, be represented on the committee?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think it's important, like I said, to include people from diverse backgrounds, diverse walks of life, who have different opinions, who are in support of multiple types of organizations that they feel passionate about, that they think that they feel deeply engaged in, that could potentially serve as a learning experience for us all. And I don't think we will achieve that, or I don't think that's an attainable goal when it comes to equal opportunity and invoking change if we're not considering all perspectives, if we don't give all different sides of the aisle an opportunity to take part in the work. And so I think that that's what we're seeing, is that they're not all inclusive. You're not listening to all sides of the argument. You're not interested in hearing any opposing points of view to what you're trying to get to. And I think that for me, that's very important. I want to listen to all sides. I don't want it to just be the conservative committee. I don't want it to just be a very liberal committee. I think that we need to have people that are somewhere in the middle, somewhere on both extremes, and some people who perhaps don't feel like they align with either side.
So sharing these,
that's how you truly, go ahead.
I think we have a delay on the internet. I didn't mean to interrupt you. So the point in sharing, then, I just want to, as I understand this, kind of the point in sharing these profiles, these backgrounds, it isn't about condemning any one of these people for their belief systems. It's more about condemning the district for putting together a committee that doesn't represent all sides. Is that correct? What I'm understanding? Okay.
That is absolutely, in a nutshell, the crux of our issue here. Our issue is not that they included people who oppose our perspective or people who support this type of work. Our position is that they excluded those who don't support critical race theory or indoctrination of children. They excluded those who don't support groups like Black Lives Matter or Red for Ed.
Okay. Well, that certainly doesn't lead to coming up with a diverse plan now, does it, if there's no diversity in the organization itself? Because the diversity by definition is all different ideas, different socioeconomic, different, race, different, all different religions, backgrounds, things of that nature. And how do we, I think, one of the things I kind of wanted to bring up as we were in our last conversation, and we didn't get to this point, but there was some condemnation on that side of the argument for the fact that you guys are wearing purple to, or that we wear purple to the meetings. Can you tell me, as I mentioned, we're red, blue. A lot of this is coming from one side of that equation or the other. What is the purple all about? I mean, is that a white racist supremacist organization, as has been accused of, or and that refers to Purple for Parents, right? That was founded here in Arizona.
Correct. Purple for Parents was founded, I believe, in 2018, and it was done so as a response to the Red for Ed movement, and it was basically to support parents who are advocating for their child's education to get the teachers back in school. And purple was specifically chosen, and this is specifically why we, LESD community, chose to wear purple, was because it was symbolic of joining blue, which is the Democratic side, the left side, and red, which is the Republican conservative side, and bringing them together, and meshing the two colors creates purple. And that is the only way that we believe we're going to be able to invoke change in this district and bring upon inclusive work, is that we are going to bring both sides together. We're going to mesh blue and purple, or I'm sorry, blue and red. And so they have then taken that and said, oh, this organization, Purple for Parents, is tied to white supremacy and tied to, all these other racist things. And number one, I have not been able to factually find any evidence that supports their argument that it is a white supremacist racist organization. And number two, they have not been present at our board meetings. The people wearing purple at our board meetings are community members that live within LESD and parents that live within LESD.
Mm-hmm. So, and I asked that question because going back to the makeup of these committees, is the makeup is very much all one-sided, if we were to pick a blue-red color, all blue in nature, very maybe diverse in race, but not necessarily diverse in belief systems. Would that be correct? And so what you're asking is that, hey, these committees, these decisions be made up, if we're going to discuss any kind of equity, any kind of diversity, any kind of coming together in a unified way, we can't have one side say, this is what everybody gets to live with.
Correct.
We have to have a diverse group of people, a truly diverse group of people, not just in the color of our skin, but in our belief systems, in our thoughts, in our socioeconomic backgrounds, in all of those areas. A very diverse group of people come together and discuss this to form any kind of unity. And I think if that were the case, that I just believe as human beings in general, we all have the same basic needs. We all have the same basic desires. We all have same basic goals, dreams for our children, for ourselves. And bringing everybody together, we can work off of those common ground, basic needs that everybody truly needs and desires to really come up with something that works for the school versus taking And I don't care which side of it is, which side you want to take. I mean, I know there's the 1619 project, but then there's the 1776 project, right?
Correct.
You can't, if we truly want diversity, those two need to come in and say, any more than you can't cut, would you? And I guess, would you say, no, it's got to be the 1776 project, not the 1619 project to continue forward for our schools? Is that the position that in a nonpartisan school board that one would take?
I don't think so. I don't believe that that's the case. If it's truly a nonpartisan school board, then we have to include both sides of the equation. And like I said, people who are somewhere in the middle and people who are just not on the map at all when it comes to this stuff, who just, have a very different and diverse point of view. I think ultimately the issue is that they are preaching diversity and inclusion, and this committee clearly is not diverse or inclusive.
Right.
So how do you create work that is supposed to be the foundation of establishing diversity and inclusion within our district when you don't have that on the committee that's doing the work?
Right. Absolutely. Well, that's certainly a lot of information for people to digest. And I know you and I were talking, and and after the weekend, I felt pretty disheartened by the whole thing, because it definitely feels like we're plugging in a belief system that is coming specifically from a political party. No matter how you look at it, it's a belief system that's being brought in regardless of if there's merits. I mean, there may very well be merits, but what I realized was happening is the story that plays out on our media every day between politicians is now playing out right here in our schools. It's playing out between our children. It's playing out between the parents. And I think, and for me, the realization was, well, if I'm listening to, and again, I'm not a big media person, but if I'm listening to this source for media, then it makes sense I'm going to have this belief system. And if I'm listening to this source for media, then it only makes sense that I'm going to have this belief system. And I mean, when you go back in history, they called television programming. Mm-hmm. When you'd get your TV guide, it used to be the TV program guide, right? I've even seen people take television and say television. It's about telling people the vision for what they see. And so that's the argument, I think, that many people have in the school is, hey, I don't want you taking that vision, that belief system, and teaching it to my child because I have a different belief system. Correct. And I guess as I looked at this whole scenario and thought, how do we as people really truly enact change? It has to be at this level. It has to be every parent in this district saying, you know what, I want better for my child than the argument I see on TV every day. Because that's all we see. I mean, there isn't news anymore. There's commentary, and it's all one side or the other. And I think you even experienced that getting into this. You knew that as media coverage occurred, depending on which media interviewed you, was going to be what the story was, right? That you would be painted a certain way depending on which media station. So at the end of the day, I guess why you are doing this, why I've agreed to have you and have other parents. And again, that invitation stays open to anybody who believes either side, either direction, that invitation. But ultimately, the only way for us to truly make a difference going forward is for all of us to say, hey, we want better than this argument to play out in our schools, in our district, in our community. And we want a diverse group with different belief systems to come together and create a plan to educate our children that works for everyone with no one left behind. Because wouldn't it be great if we could create a world that works for everyone with no one left behind?
That would be absolutely wonderful. I think that that is exactly at the root of our goal is to achieve that we can come together and find a solution that's going to serve every need of every child academically in public school. I think unfortunately right now that's not occurring because, as you said, the narrative that is being pushed is very much a Democratic narrative. It's very much a liberal perspective. And we're not saying that that needs to be discounted or that you don't need to hear that point of view or that they don't need to be a part of the solution. We'd like them to be engaged and be a part of the solution. What we're saying is we'd also like to be a part of that solution. We'd like diverse perspectives included in those conversations and on those committees. And that's not occurring. And, you know, I think the ultimate goal, as I've said multiple times, is to achieve academic success for all students, to ensure that every student with an LESD has the appropriate resources to have equal opportunity to achieve those goals. This is not the way. This is absolutely not the way, because it is not going to unify anybody. If anything, it's served to divide everybody in this community. And we are willing to engage with people from different perspectives. We need to hear that. We'd like to hear that. We'd like to work together to achieve that purple, that you know, blend of blue and red, that blend of both sides of the argument. We feel like it's vital if we're going to succeed, because ultimately there's always going to be people who are raising their kids in a Democratic household and people who are raising their children in a Republican household and people who are somewhere on the independent side of the spectrum or Tea Party, you know, there's always going to be different political views. What we're saying is it is the job of the public school to educate our children without division, without pushing racial inequities as the go-to for academic success or academic resources. And the moral compass of that child needs to be established between the parent and the child. I don't think that it's the district's place or the place of public education to invoke things that are emotionally divisive and driven to meet the needs of only one side. That is not what I send my child to school for. You are there to educate my child, educate them, and my kid should not come home and know who you voted for or know things about your personal life that are above the mental grade level for a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old.
Well, and isn't that the beauty of, I think, the United States? United, the ununited right now, it feels like sometimes, but isn't that the beauty of the freedom that we have here in this country, that we do have the right to be blue or red or somewhere in the middle and be purple or whatever. We have the right, or we've had the right to have whatever belief system we have without condemnation. And it does seem that the education system has always had more of that liberal approach to educating. And what it seems that, you know, you're asking for is, hey, let's honor everybody across. Let's not, because it's not so much of, hey, let me fix it for this group of people. Let me teach inclusion for this group of people. Let me teach, you know, more tolerance or whatever that looks like for a certain group of people. It's more of a, let's condemn this group of people in order to lift this group of people up, which is what is and what has been the result as we've felt it in the community, is a huge division in the community, period. And, I think my realization was, what it has to start in every single home. It has to start, and that's, I think that's where this does fit into, for those that are asking, hey, why, Brenda, why are you putting this on Cheap Mama Life? Why is this a topic of conversation? And I think it's because I am so passionate about us changing our own hearts, our own belief systems, to create that a leadership environment for our children, for our community, and to affect and impact change where we can. And this is where we can do it as a community, right?
Correct.
We can teach our kids to be loving and accepting and not pointing fingers or blaming or picking sides. That's okay. We can start by teaching our children that, teaching our, and being leaders in the community by doing that. So I commend you for your efforts to do that on this board and to truly bring a nonpartisan approach to the board.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because that's exactly what we're trying to do. We don't, I have certain viewpoints, and I raise my children in a certain way, and I'm a Christian, but I don't believe that those are things that need to be a part of a nonpartisan board who's making decisions for people who don't believe the same thing that I believe. That's why it is so important to get back to the focus of public education. Needs to be exactly that. It needs to be there to educate all children without bias to one side or the other.
All of those things about you bring a perspective to the table that needs to be heard, needs
Correct.
to be honored in order to have a united front, but it doesn't need to be the driving force behind the curriculum that's put out there. Is that a good way to sum it up?
Yes, I think that's
just
exactly.
like their beliefs are important to add to the conversation.
Correct.
And again, it sharing those profiles, sharing those folks on the committee, sharing any of that wasn't meant to condemn. I mean, kudos to them for standing up for what they believe in, right?
Right. And, kudos to them for committing to
for taking part in
their time to do this work. We're not saying by any means that we're trying to condemn them or demonize them because of their beliefs. What we're saying is, great, you had 3 parents from one perspective on this committee. How about we add another 3?
Right. With a different perspective.
Correct.
Good questions. I look forward to being able to share those answers when you get records requests and things like that with the community, because ultimately, again, my role here is, please, moms, dads, aunts, uncles, grandparents, neighbors,
right,
get involved. And first and foremost, get involved by doing your own research, educating yourself, and being informed on what's happening so that you can bring your unique perspective, set of experiences. I think our neighbors, our grandparents, they've been through similar, changes and maybe called a different name, but similar. I can't think of the word. Pushes to
Correct.
change education, and
right.
they've experienced outcomes that either worked or didn't work. Let's hear those perspectives and say, hey, you know what? This feels, looks like, tastes like this that we went through when I was a kid, and it didn't work. And I think at the end of that was my biggest takeaway from all of this is our public education hasn't worked for a long time for a lot of different reasons. And the really cool thing about what's happened here is it's brought it to light at a level, at a place where there's voices that can be heard, voices that are willing to step up and share perspectives. And maybe it's just time that we start to listen to the voices on the other side of whatever narrative that we're starting to do, recognize that we're all human. We all have the same basic wants, desires, and needs for our kids.
Correct.
Because I think you've pointed out, I mean, haven't we had a significant decline in enrollment at our district?
Prior to the end of this school year, we were already down 1,000 kids, and we know that that number has climbed significantly since the end of the school year. I've heard from parents personally who, more than a dozen parents who have pulled their children out of LASD schools. And a lot of it is because of the current board and the decisions that are being made that will affect their child's ability to get a not non-racial driven or non-partisan driven education.
Right.
So they're pulling their kids out because they see the district going in one direction and one direction only, and that cause being championed by a very extreme leftist perspective.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you for having me on, because I think it's important that we get out there. I think it's important that we encourage parents and community members to go out and do the research and find the facts themselves on both sides of the equation.
Right.
And, you know, I know that there are parents out there who are very heavily supporting this type of work, and I would welcome coming on to your podcast with them if you know, somebody like the Danny Quist or Kamaria McDonald or Mark Bussell. You know, I would be more than happy to engage in a respectful dialogue with them that the community gets to see.
Yeah,
I think that would be really important. So
I agree. I think it would be, I think it would really, again, I think we all have the same basic needs. And if we start to begin to open dialogue, and I commend you for doing that. I commend you for stepping outside of what was probably, you know, somewhat peaceful, comfortable, you know, and you've taken on this monster that, you know, hopefully you can bring some peace, some understanding, some different perspectives too in the district. And, you know, and when I say monster, I said it wasn't just this board, it's the history of education, how it's been evolving. And because we're seeing this across the United States, like this is a push in many school districts across the state. So you're not, you know, while it may seem that, okay, Litchfield's controversial, it's happening all over the place.
It's absolutely happening all over our country. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think the big thing for me is, you know, we need to fix public education.
Right.
And the route that the route or the movement for this type of change is not going to fix public education.
Right.
It's going to further damage what is already, you know, causing harm to our children, mm-hmm. which is the fact that they are not academically achieving success that we see in other countries or in other parts of our own country. And we need to focus on that type of change that's going to bring quality education back to our public school system, and not on work that is going to further damage and divide what our kids are learning.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Renee. I look forward to having you back with us. Thanks for your transparency. And, you know, the invitation is always open, because I believe that as a mom, as a leader in the community, our number one role is to be the center of that circle of influence for our children. That's how we can improve the country, the world, is that leadership that we pass down to our children. And I think you're setting an example of true leadership and what it takes to start to make a difference. And I appreciate you being on and being an example of that, and really opening your heart to everyone. Not, you know, I've not heard an argument yet from you, or a condemnation of any person in their beliefs. The only argument, condemnation at all has been maybe behavior, some of the actions that have been taken, but never have I heard you, point a finger at a person and make it about that person and who they are and what their beliefs are. And I really appreciate that about you.
Those are very kind words. Thank you, Brenda. And, I think that's very important for me. I don't want anybody to go out there and feel like I'm personally attacking them or condemning them, which is why I don't post a lot of things on social media that could be misconstrued or interpreted in a way that if perhaps somebody's child was to see a post about their parent, would really hurt them. That's not my goal. That is not, I don't think that's right. And I don't think it's justified. And I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it serves itself I don't think it lends itself to serve what we're trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. And what we're trying to achieve is really simple. We want equal opportunity for all children in education. We want all children to be armed with the resources necessary to achieve success academically, and without the burden of discrimination.
And those are the things we need to look at, right? I mean, what I saw a statistic the other day that 53% of college students entering college today will not even have opportunities in the career field that they're going into or learning about when they graduate, because those will be gone. Right. So we can't keep doing the same old crazy thing when it comes to teaching our children that we used to do in a world that is absolutely evolving when it comes to 5G, technology, all of those things. You're right. The whole system needs to be revamped, and it's not about, because kids get it. Kids right. get treating one another with decency and right. respect, especially if that's modeled in their home. What we don't need to teach our kids how to do that. Yes, behavior coaches may need to go into the home. There may need to be, hey, these are classroom rules that model decency, etiquette, and things like that. But if we're out here on media condemning and pointing fingers and the teachers are doing that, then what are we teaching the children?
So, we're not modeling that leadership that we're trying to invoke in our kids.
We're not.
And that's the thing is these kids are very much paying attention when it comes to how adults around them behave, and they're being influenced by that behavior. And so to show them something that is, causing or inflicting pain or hurt or is, condemning or antagonizing another adult, it is not showing them the qualities that they need to be learning from us. It's not leading by example. And I think that that's a lot of what would solve our problems, is if all of these adults that were involved in our child's education, we're leading by example. We're doing the things that, and not to say that they're not. There's a lot of wonderful teachers out there who I believe that got into that line of work for all the right reasons, but I do believe there are a few out there that perhaps didn't. And I think that, kids read emotion. They can sense somebody's mood, or, if the teacher's having a bad day, or if something's going on, they pick up on all of those cues. And so I think it's very important for individually educators and parents and community members and adults in general to come to a point of self-reflection where they realize that these little kids are watching and learning from what we're doing. And so that's one of the biggest reasons why I refuse to put things out there on social media that are a personal attack on anybody, even though it's done to me. That's okay. It's not okay, but I mean, that doesn't mean that I'm going to answer with the same tone. That's just, to me, that's right. It's not leading by example.
At the end of the day, the change that we all desire has to come from within us first, and then we Correct. Can influence those around us. And thank you so much for being an example of a change agent, and for being here and continuing. I know sometimes it feels like you're just beating your head up against a closed door, or And yet you keep coming back. And thank you so much for being who you are and being a light in a really difficult time for our students and our kids. And, come back and join me again.
Thank you so much.
All right. You have a great day, Renee. Thanks so
You too.
much.